Laura of Slice of Pie Quilts here at Missouri Star, and we're going to sew wings. There are templates for both butterfly wings and dragon wings. There's elastic to hold it over the kids' shoulders. Today we're going to sew the butterfly wings. Let's get sewing. To make the butterfly wings, you'll need 1 yard of main fabric and 1/4 yard of accent fabric, 1 yard of fold-over elastic, and 1 yard of Peltex. You'll also need a package of fusible fleece and some fusible web. We'll be using a rotary cutter and rulers, scissors, a disappearing ink pen, and sewing clips. I'll also need a couple pins and coordinating thread. And if you want to make dragon wings, you'll need 1 yard of fabric for that. Be sure that you print the templates for the wing shape. So here's the butterfly wings. And then I've cut a piece of Peltex and a piece of fusible fleece, big enough that the wings will fit on there. Okay? And then we're going to press that to the wrong side of our main fabric. Okay, so we're going to press both the fusible fleece and the Peltex to this 1 yard piece. Now, you want to make sure that you are using the glue side towards the wrong side of the fabric. When I was making some of these, I kind of wasn't paying attention and a little bit of the glue went the wrong way, so don't do that mistake. So I'm going to lay out this fusible fleece here. I feel the texture on this side, so I know the glue is facing up. The other side's really smooth. And then I'm going to lay my fabric right on top. I want to make sure that I'm covering all of that fusible fleece so that it doesn't get on my iron. And then we'll just press. Now that's fused to the back, and we'll do the same thing with the piece of Peltex. So I want to feel to make sure, I'm going to double check that the smooth side is down and the rough glue side is up towards the fabric. I have my fabric covering all of the pieces, the whole thing, and then I'm going to press. Now, that's pressed to the back of the fabric too. While you're at the iron, you want to make sure that you also press a piece of fusible web to the back of the accent fabric for the wings. I've already done that here. And when you do it, you want to make sure that you cut the piece of fusible a little bit smaller than the fabric, so then when you place it on there and you iron it, it's not going to get on your ironing board or your iron. So now that we have the fusible and our pieces of Peltex and fusible foam fused to the fabric, we're going to trace the pieces and cut them out. I'm going to start with the big pieces. So you can actually cut both of the layers at the same time if you've fused them like I did here. So I'm going to put them together like this, and then with the template, lay it on top, and then I'm going to use my disappearing ink pen, but you can use a marker or a pencil. It doesn't matter. This will be on the inside of the wings, so you won't see it. So just use whatever marking tool you like. And we're just going to trace the template all the way around, and then we'll also trace the accent shapes on the wings on that other fabric and cut them out with scissors. Once you've traced the shape, then use scissors to carefully cut it out. If you're cutting both layers at the same time, you want to make sure that it extends the same, it goes all the way to the top and the sides so that you're cutting all the way through the layers and you'll get 2 pieces at the same time. When you snip into a corner, I like to make sure that the tip of the scissors stops right at that point. If you have the scissors open like this, you might accidentally cut too far, and you don't want to do that on the wings. So use the tip of the scissors right at that point so you don't cut too far. Once you have the butterfly wings cut out of both of the Peltex and the fusible fleece, then we're going to trace and cut out the accent pieces. So on each wing, I'm going to place 2 of the colors, like on this one. There's 2 of the taller pieces and 2 smaller ones. So that's what we're going to make. To do this, you're going to trace the shapes one direction, and then you're going to flip them over and trace the mirror image of it. So this will be for one wing, and then flip it over and trace it the other direction for the other wing. And do the same thing for the other piece. Then flip it over to have a mirror image of it. Now I'm going to cut those out, and we'll have all the cutting done. Now that I have all 4 pieces of the accents cut out, I'm going to fuse those to the fabric that's on the fusible fleece. So I like to use it on this one because I'm going to applique that on and stitch it, and I just like the extra texture that it adds. It's like a little bit of quilting texture, if you will, when you applique those on. So now I'm going to take the paper off. I just fold it back and crease the paper, and then it's easy to peel off, and place those where I like them. I'm just going to fuse them in place. Now I'm ready to go to the sewing machine and applique those shapes on, and then we can continue making the wings. Now we're ready to applique these accent shapes on. I'm just going to use a straight stitch to sew it, and so I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch inside from the raw edge. You could use a zigzag stitch or a decorative stitch on your machine. Either one would work fine. I like the straight stitch because this machine here is only a straight stitch machine. It doesn't have the decorative stitches, and it works great. When you get to a curved spot, you want to stop with the needle down, and you can lift the presser foot and pivot the piece a little bit, and then just take a couple more stitches and do it again so that you can get all the way around the curve. When you get back to where you started, you're going to backstitch to secure the threads. And do each shape exactly the same way. I've added just these 4 shapes on this pair of wings, but over here we have a monarch, so you could add more shapes to make any design that you want on your butterfly wings. And if you're making the dragon wings, you don't have to applique any shapes, but instead I added these quilting lines from the top down to the bottom to give it a little bit more texture. You could even do some free motion quilting on here and create some really unique butterfly wings. Now we're going to put the elastic onto the wings. So we're going to need 2 pieces of 14-inch long of this elastic here, and I'm going to use the ruler here on my sewing machine table to measure that. When you're measuring elastic, you don't want to stretch it. Just lay it on there and cut it right at the right length. Now, on the butterfly wings that you just did, they have the fusible fleece on the back. This is where we're going to add the elastic. So I'm going to put it right here at the top, and then the other end will go down at the bottom of the wings. So here I'm leaving a space in the middle, and we're going to stitch this down here, and then we'll stitch the other piece of elastic right here. You want about 1.5 to 2 inches in between the ends of the elastic, and so I'm not going to measure it, I'm just going to guess, but if you wanted to measure, it's about 2 inches. Whenever I sew elastic on like this, I'm going to stitch over it several times to give it some strength. As the kids put this over their shoulders, it's going to pull on the elastic, and you wouldn't want it to pop out of the seam. So I'm going to go several times forward and backward to give it some extra strength. I'm sewing that right in the seam allowance. So within that 1/4 inch space between the raw edge of the butterfly wings and within just about 1/8 of an inch away, really. So that way it'll be hidden when we sew the wings together. Now we're going to take the opposite ends and do the same thing at the bottom. Make sure that you don't have a twist in the elastic. So I like to just pull it, kind of lay it straight, and then that way I know it's not twisted. Leaving that space in between them, and then stitching 3 or 4 times over it to keep it nice and secure. And the last one we'll put here. Now we're going to sew the 2 sides of the butterfly wings together, but this elastic is notorious for getting up here in the seam, and then that'll be seam ripping you don't want to do. So what I would do is take some pins and just pin the extra elastic out here in the middle of the wing so it's away from the seam as far as possible so you don't have a chance of catching it. So just like that, now it's pinned out of the way. And we're going to sew the 2 halves of the wings together like this. I'm going to clip them together so they don't move as I start to sew. Now we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam all the way around, but we're going to end up having to turn this right sides out. And so you want to find the straightest side that you have and leave about a 4-inch opening. It needs to be big enough to get your hand in because this Peltex takes a little bit of effort to turn it, and so you definitely don't want the hole to be too small. So I think that the straightest side on these butterfly wings is right up here. So that's where I'm going to start and stop. So I'll start here, go all the way around, and leave that opening to turn it right sides out. When you get to this inside corner here, you're going to stitch a little tiny bit farther than you think you should so that when you turn, it'll be a 1/4 inch past the corner. So then I stop with the needle down, and then I can turn the wings and come back down. So if you can see, I actually didn't go far enough because I don't have a 1/4 inch before that, so I'm going to pivot back, take one more stitch and try again. And now I'm ready to sew because this edge is lined up with the edge of my foot, so I know it's now a 1/4 inch. The wings are a bit bulky, and sometimes you have to kind of move them out of the way as you're sewing, but they're bendable, so they'll go under the arm of your sewing machine just fine. Okay, we're back at a corner, so I want to try to stitch about 1/4 of an inch past that intersection so that when I turn, see, I did it again. I'm about 1 stitch too short. So I'm going to pivot back, take that 1 stitch, and then see if it lines up better. Yep, now the side of the foot is even and I'm ready to sew. Okay, don't forget to leave the opening. So now, before we turn this right sides out, there's a lot of curved sections. So we want to clip those curves to help that peltex that's really kind of stiff. We want to help it have a space to go when we turn it right sides out. And so you're going to want to clip along the curve. And you can snip just straight lines, or if you want, you can actually snip little triangles, and that'll help it to lay flat inside the seam when we turn it. And so you're just going to go around and do this for all the curves. When you're snipping, you want to make sure that you don't snip the threads, otherwise you're going to have to re-stitch that part. So just barely cut into the seam allowance right up to the threads, but don't go through them. When you get to this corner that we were sewing, you also want to make sure that you snip right into that corner like that. That'll really help it to not have a pucker there when we turn it right sides out. Once you've snipped all the way around, now you're ready to turn it right sides out. I'm also making a pair of dragon wings, so let me show you how that's a little bit different when you're doing that clipping. So I have this pair of dragon wings that I've at the same exact step where we're getting ready to turn it right sides out. So you would normally clip all the way around on the curved sections, but the dragon wings also have these points down at the bottom, and so you want to remove some of the bulk of this extra fabric and peltex down here. And so at each of those spots, you're actually going to clip away like you were clipping the corners off of something before you turn it right sides out. So we're going to clip away a little extra there, and then you'd still want to snip the curves. So that one's a little bit different, but you do the same process and do that all the way around, and then you'll be ready to turn it right sides out. Let's go back to the butterfly wings. So now we have this opening here, and we're going to put our fingers between the 2 layers of fabric, and now we're going to turn this whole thing through this hole. Now, the peltex is stiff, and it's meant to be, but it does bend. So this is going to take a little bit of effort and time, but just be patient, and you'll get it. Okay, so I started to turn it, and remember we had those pins in there, so you want to be careful that you don't poke yourself. So when you find one, you want to really carefully remove the pin before you get it stuck in your hand. You could even reach in and grab the other one if you can get your hand in there right now. That way it's not going to poke you. Okay, once you have it almost turned all the way, you can stick your hand in there and push out all those corners. You could use a hair marker or maybe a pencil with the eraser end to do this too. Once you've turned it all the way right sides out, then you want to move the elastic to the back of it. Sometimes when you turn it, it's like the elastic is stuck here on the front side like this. And all you have to do is put the wings through it. So get the elastic to the back, and now we're going to top stitch all the way around. Now the layers are going to be a little bit thick, so you want to stitch really slowly. Now, some sewing machines are going to do this just fine, and others are going to have a little trouble. So just do whatever your sewing machine can handle. And if you need to go really slow or you need to turn the hand wheel to do it, it's perfectly fine. Sometimes the elastic gets stuck to your sewing machine table, so be careful. Just stop, fix it, and then keep going. When you get to the opening where we turned it right sides out, you'll want to tuck the pieces under about 1/4 of an inch and then stitch right over it to stitch the hole closed. Sometimes you might get a pucker from that spot because it's, the fabric will stretch if your hand, if your hand went in there and was bigger than the opening. It's okay if you have to take a tuck. Like I just had to make a little pucker there. It's perfectly fine. When the kids play with it, they are never going to mention that little spot that you had to sew shut like that. When you get to the elastic, you want to make sure that it's straight on the back and not folded under so you won't stitch over it. So I'm kind of making sure, I'm peeking up under here and making sure it's smoothed out of the way before I top stitch around this top part of the butterfly. And then before I get to the other one, I'll do the same thing. Just kind of check that it's not folded underneath there. As I come around here to the bottom, I can see this elastic poking out. So that's what I mean. You don't want to stitch over this because then this elastic will be stuck in that spot. So I'm going to lift it up and make sure that it's back out of the way, just like in a straight line outside of there. So I'm just stitching right over the edge and not over the extra elastic. I'm going to stop and do it to this one too. Just make sure it's out of the way. We're almost done. When you get back to the beginning, backstitch to secure those threads. Okay, and now this is the butterfly wings almost done. This could be done all the way, and when the kids wear it, they'll flap and move a lot. If you want to, you can fold them in half, and then from the back, we can stitch right along this center seam, and then that way they'll stay a bit more open, like butterfly wings stay this way. So if you want to try that, then you're going to stitch a seam right here. This is a lot of layers. Some sewing machines cannot sew through this many layers, and so it's okay if you stop right here. But if you want to try it, then just fold the wings in half, make sure the elastic is back out of the way, and then we're going to sew just like 1/2 inch away from the center. I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. I'm definitely going to sew slow too, because I don't want to break a needle because it's a lot of layers for the sewing machine to go through. So go slow and then see if your sewing machine can do it. And that's it. You've made the butterfly wings. Thanks for watching this tutorial with Missouri Star.
We hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you are not already part of the Missouri Star Quilt family, you can hit the subscribe button below so you won't miss a thing. And if you click that bell, it'll notify you every time a new tutorial comes out. See you next Friday.